Good morning and welcome. First of all, safety. If there is a fire, leave. If one of you should happen to use the car to leave the building, that would be fine too. And if you keep driving, that would be probably fine too. The rest of us, bring your clothes, meet outside, far away from the fire. So, on that note, it is a fantastic pleasure to welcome you. Thanks for coming. I think one of you said as they were coming in, wow, this is slightly more creative than I was imagining. This is slightly outside of my comfort zone. Good. We couldn't claim the title Learning to Work Differently with Strategy if we put you in a classroom setting and we killed you with PowerPoints, like we will for the next few minutes. Now, the opening question that brought us here today was actually raised close to 4 years ago in Copenhagen. Elizabeth and I was at the time living in Copenhagen, asking ourselves, how can companies and managers and top leaders and boards learn to work more innovatively around strategy? And when we realized, digging into the literature, digging into the research, digging into a lot of our own experiences, was that we need to develop new visual tools to facilitate that change. So we started with this. The mad scientists with the crazy hair doing a lot of what we call applied action research. And we started close to 4 years ago in Copenhagen, where we started working a little bit along with the Copenhagen Business School. Very quickly we realized that we needed to take this back to Norway, and we founded the company that's hosting today, which is called Innovate. Over the next couple of months, we started working with BI. We opened our facilities in Brazil. And very quickly, we found a lot of companies with the interest and curiosity around how can we work differently with strategy. We started working with a few of these companies. We started working along with BI, Norwegian Business School, of developing new executive programs around this. We started teaching. We started going more and more out of Norway. We started expanding to new companies and new industries. And we are learning so much. It is fantastic to sort of see the experiences that we have, the feedbacks that we get, and the processes that are happening. And today we have close to 100 companies that are just starting to learn to work differently with strategy. But this is really just the beginning. When we look the next 10 to 20 years, we are just starting. And we have these kind of growth ambitions. So that's our little story. And we'll be talking about your little story in just a few minutes. If you're curious enough, you can find all of this online. Creative Commons, open source, everything is available. And of course, that's us. So, on that note, welcome. We have a full day, and for those of you with the time and the curiosity to stick around for dinner, we have also a full evening on learning to work differently with strategy. Our goals today are 4. Number 1, we are going to help each other to think differently. It starts with the cognitive processes. And as you see from this room, either it's the chessboard, it's the world map, or it's the interesting car itself, which shouldn't exist. This car shouldn't be possible. We're going to learn to work differently. We're going to have a pretty cool time, network, and have fun. Now, the problem, very simply put, with strategy is, this is you. Or maybe differently, this is the cognitive experience of many executive teams working with strategy. Now, they're not going to admit that themselves, but most companies that work with strategy happen to be trapped by assumptions, history, legacy, what they believe to be industry norms, and they take those limits as given. This car. Every single expert in the car industry about 6 or 7 years ago said the battery technology to make this possible is at least 10 to 15 years away. It was just a fact. And then, of course, Tesla comes along, and this thing starts driving around. And all of a sudden, they break some of the assumptions to what is possible. And this phenomenon, it happens with virtually every company in every industry. The next problem is this. If you go through a management education, you learn to handle PowerPoint and text, and you learn to talk, and very often talk your organization to death with a lot of blah, blah, blah. The best of intentions, but whatever message you have, it's drowning in words. Now, if you go to school, it's the same thing. Most strategy books today that's supposed to teach you how to work with strategy, they're filled with words and words and words. So, solution, very easy. Number one, hence the room, we need to figure out a way to introduce more creative thinking into the strategy process. Very few companies do this explicitly. Very few business schools will teach you this explicitly. And we need to figure out how do we make strategy and innovation more visual and more of a shared process. So, on that little note, now it's your turn. And this is where this fun starts. I am the boring part, you are the fun part. So, as you can see around your tables, you have A3 papers, and you have pens in many colors. If you prefer black, that's okay. We would like you to try to sketch out your company's strategy visually. Now, you may use words, but please try to go with the visual avenue. And you can make it really, really, really complex. But that's probably not a good idea. You can maybe use a little bit of colors. Regardless, you have a blank sheet of paper, and you have 9 minutes. Enjoy. And that's time. Now what's interesting, two things happened. First of all, about half of you were finished in about 4 minutes. Now if you ask the average strategy academic, that shouldn't even be possible, but it is. Secondly, all of you have done something. Now, with respect, some of us aren't really comfortable with drawing stuff for strategy stuff. But you just did. Congratulations. So, a few more notes. Number one, you have noticed that we have invited you to different tables. Everybody except Karen have found their right table. And there's a reason for it. We strongly believe that you can learn a lot from each other more than just from us. So we'll be on the stage every now and then, but a lot of the learning that you get, we hope and invite you to get around your tables. So for instance, we have made sure that nobody from Statoil is sitting on the table with somebody from Statoil, but that would be overkill. And we've tried to mix different industries, different companies. And we really invite you to take this day to work on each other's strategy issues. Now, disclaimer, some of you might have secrets. That's okay, you can keep them, but some of you probably don't have too many secrets. Share them. Cool. So, on your tables you have sticky stuff. Sticky stuff is fun, cool, and it's good to play with. What we would like you to do is grab some of the sticky stuff, and when you have, bring your strategy posters and join us down this way. Come on. So what do you have here? Imagine the following. You are going to present your company's strategy to a bunch of mostly strangers in about 30 seconds.
How we do stakeholder engagement, how do we actually engage and build deep...
Which doesn't sound a whole lot, but it is a massive ambition.
So we're going into a lot of products in the future. We're going to Mars. We're going to drill on Mars, and I'm not kidding.
You all just met about 40 minutes ago. And now you're just getting a pretty cool introduction to, I was going to say your playmates, but I see that's the wrong word, your table mates, if you will. And you'll actually be working on several of these core issues, if you choose to, during the day. But you can really get a lot out of it. Now, Tesla, they are doing something very interesting. And if you dig deep into the Tesla culture, they have a principle that I'm just learning about. And it's called designing from first principles. I think it's so cool. But does anybody know what it means? It took me quite some work to actually find it. It's on YouTube. It's all over YouTube when you just know how to Google it. Anyway, designing from first principle means if you take away all the noise, all the assumptions, all the history, all the baggage, and you try to drill down to the very essence of whatever it is you're working with, and you try to design a solution from first principle, meaning the very essence of something. And I think, Brage, you'll see this with Zaptec. You start without a lot of the noise, and you realize that you can actually find new solutions pretty quickly. Now, the biggest challenge for Tesla is actually the batteries. The car industry said the batteries are too expensive, the battery packs are too expensive, and you can't build a good electric car because the batteries are just too expensive. But when they went down to what we call designing from first principles, they realized that the bits and pieces, the copper, the nickel, and all the bits that make out the battery by themselves, they're not very expensive. What's expensive is the bad way of going from bits and pieces into a finished battery. So instead of looking at, ooh, batteries are really expensive, Tesla went all the way back and they bought a lot of these materials, the nickel, the copper, and so on the London exchange. And they're now building the world's biggest factory of making batteries because they realize that we are so much better at this than the rest of the world. Now, strategy in most companies and most education programs is very complex. It's very complicated. You have lots of books and a lot of slides. What we're trying to do here is to take strategy back and design strategy from first principle, at least on a communication basis. Because every one of you in your daily operations, your daily jobs, are working with strategy and very often communicating strategy. Question is, do people get it? And if you look that way, one of the things that we're working on is how can we simplify strategy to its most basic level? And if you go to the very most basic level, strategy should answer two questions. Question number one, where are we going? Question number two, how are we going to get there? Now, you can complicate it with a lot of stuff and a lot of tools. You can call it vision, mission, strategic intent, ambitions and dreams, and you have tons of models that you can use. But on its most basic level, it should answer these two questions. Did yours? It's an interesting question to ponder for yourself, to really, when I did this, did I sufficiently in my mind and in my communication clarify where we're going, how we're going to get there? That is the very essence. That is designing strategy from its first principles. And that's part of what we're going to be doing here. So, Holger, you want to grab one of the boards and step in here? Now, I'm pretty impressed. This is a very good start. And this one is intriguing. This one is very nice. This one is nice. All of these are nice. And yet we should all try to learn from this guy. He's doing a little bit better. He's from Germany. His name is Holger Nielspool. He is a visual strategy facilitator. Now, that's not a common education in Norway, nor anywhere in the world. It's not a common work title. But over the last 4.5 years, he has been traveling the world, working with companies large and small, of how can we better visualize, design, and communicate our strategy. We started working together about 6-7 months ago. And it's really interesting to see the impact that we're reaching with his work. Holger, you want to tell us quickly what we have here?
Yeah, we have here just a summary of what Christian talked in the first part of this day. So just to recall it, he made up an agenda for today to think different, work different, learn and network and have fun with it. And it's all about working as visual as you can, and this is important, as you can, not only work visual, because then you get out of this blah 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 zone and can put on the strategy as you saw here in just 30 seconds. That's the question. Can you tell your story in 30 seconds and try to learn by sharing with each other, with the speakers, and so on in the networking, and that's what Christian told in the first few minutes of this day, and this should recall this, that you keep it in mind and can remember it. That's it.
And you'll see plenty of more of his work and your work during the day. Thanks, grab your seats, and we will take you through the world of strategy. When we look at the world of strategy, the very, very big picture today, there are 5 key issues that we're seeing. So on a very, very high level worldview of strategy. Item number 1, business models are getting broken faster. Kodak is a classic example. Microsoft is a very current example. And one of the things that some of you mentioned with Statoil is actually the same thing, where we're looking at on the industry level, what is happening to the industry level business model for oil and gas. Secondly, the lifetime of large companies, big companies, is getting shorter and shorter. Simply put, large firms are dying faster. And very interesting research done on this by the Innovate team in Boston. At the same time, the speed and complexity of more or less everything is increasing. It's the result of globalization and digitization. And the sum of this is change, change, change faster. Now, to handle this, several companies are learning to cycle through business models. It is in the field of strategy a fairly new term, but it basically means leave your old business, invent new business, but at an extremely faster pace. And we're going to teach you this afternoon. What does it mean for your company to cycle through business models faster? And finally, disruption, which in its beginning was seen as a rare event. Disruption, meaning disruptive innovation, disruptive business model, disruptive technology, is happening faster and is really becoming the new normal. And virtually every single industry that we're looking at today are either exposed in the process or soon to be facing disruption. So those 5 big trends. Yet most companies operate strategy as a linear plan, maybe a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, or even a 10-year plan. But what we're seeing is the need to introduce a whole new way of thinking around strategy, where you look at strategy as a portfolio of competing business models at the same time. And for instance, a company like Statoil frequently say our business model in the singular, but reality is Statoil has a large portfolio of business models, but we're not really addressing it as such. Even small companies, even a company like Communicator 365, how many employees do you have technically? 10. If you were to look at that company, you would see that it's not one single, or at least it shouldn't be one single business model. It should actually be a portfolio. And we're going to teach you this mechanism a little bit later today. It is pretty fascinating once you get it. Change versus the current paradigm. Every single company has what we call a dominant logic. Now, a dominant logic is, this is how our business is run, this is how our industry is run, this is how things are done, this is how things will be getting done in the future. And this dominant logic, it seeps into culture, it seeps into management processes, it seeps into recruiting, it seeps into every aspect of the business. Very few companies have learned really how to do what we call strategic transformation, to master the art of transforming and transforming and transforming again. But companies that are going to grow big and survive will need to have this skill on a very high level. Now the big problem is chess. Anybody play chess? So you know, how many pieces do you have in chess? This is pretty easy. This is one of those. You have 32 pieces. And how many squares do you have? I'll help you along. It's 64. You all knew that. I know that. Now, chess, they have certain rules. For instance, in chess, you're not allowed to airdrop a cluster of pieces like that and just wipe out the opposing team. You can't do it. Furthermore, you're not allowed, if you look this way, to attack from the rear, where you'll actually leave the table, go underneath it, and attack like this. You're not allowed. It's not how chess is played. Furthermore, you're not allowed to play with an elephant, because chess doesn't have elephants. You're not allowed to play with penguins, even though it says bite me penguins, because it's not allowed. And finally, this cute little bird, it doesn't belong here. It's not how chess is played. Try it during one of the breaks, it's pretty cool. What happens is that most companies take the rules of chess, or the rules of the industry, or what we call the industry norms as given. That's how things are done, that's how things should be done. Again, the car industry was very specific that there's really no market for electric cars. The technology isn't there, it's ugly and nobody wants it. Oops. We are introducing a different view on strategy. Strategy is a very different process, much more fluid. Rules are to be bent or broken. Industry norms are to be challenged or changed or proven differently. A small company from a village called Stavanger can actually do a Mars mission, because it's really not that difficult when you just figure out how to do it. A small oil and gas company from Norway can actually grow into one of the largest and most innovative technology companies in the world if they choose to do so. If you take a different perspective on strategy. Now, if we bring this into a very brief table, it's the same as on the wall over here. On one side, you have strategy as analysis. It's what most of us are taught in school. Strategy as analysis focuses on, strategy is the analytical, logic, and linear process, where you very often do cash flow analysis well into the future, assuming a stable environment, which you know is not really true, but that's what they teach you. You expect the future to be stable. You expect the future to be very much like the present, and you expect the business environment to be very rational. It is very often not. And you use the old classic tools like the SWOT and the PASTEL and the 5 forces, because that's the tools that you have been trained in. What we are working with is what we call strategy as innovation. In this perspective, strategy is fundamentally a creative exercise. It's a disruptive exercise, and you're trying to think, how can we be very different, extremely different from what everybody else is doing? It requires different tools, it requires different mindsets. And as we progress today, and we look at this company, you'll see over and over again that they have all the building blocks, if you will, of strategy as innovation. And when we have small startups, slightly bigger companies, or slightly bigger companies still, I really want to invite you today to how can you move more to the strategy as innovation side. This is fantastically covered in this book. Anybody read it yet? 1, 2, 3. Oh, music. The rest of you will during the day. It was recently named the Strategy Book of the Year. And Rita, who wrote it, starts with this story. Now, why is it that these two companies who both used to make film for camera, we all know this, one had 123,000 employees, that's around 5 times the size of Statoil, so it was like a medium-sized company. And the other one had about 70,000. The big one, gone. The small one, wildly successful in very different fields. If you dig to the essence of that story, you find that management at Kodak refused to accept change, period. That's simple. And we do it slightly more complex in the book, but that's the very essence. Fuji had the confidence in gambling with new business areas while they still were successful in the old. Look at a company like Nordan, or Viking, or maybe even Statoil. How much are we gambling in developing new business areas, wildly new business, like going to Mars, while we also maintain and decline the old? It's the essence of the end of competitive advantage. Assumption number 1, your core business will die faster. It might be an Indian IT company. It might be a Chinese manufacturer. It might be a Polish manufacturer. It might be a Brazilian oil and gas company that comes into Norway and buys up most of your business. Are we making innovation a core skill? Most companies no. But I'm super thrilled to have several of the people from Statoil's innovation team here, because you probably have one of the most important jobs in all of Norway. Constant change and morphing. Most companies' cultures are alien to change at a fundamental level. How easy is it for us to morph into new business areas? And finally, do we have strategy as a linear plan, or do we have strategy as a portfolio of options? That is the very essence. Now, the challenge for most companies, we discussed it slightly earlier, is this. The average employee and most managers, they do not know or understand the company's strategy. Management team will do it, they will present it, and that's very often where it stops. The whole translating into action becomes very difficult. Research by Kaplan and Norton says around 80 to 95% of the average employee, they do not understand company strategy. And then there's one guy, super engaged, super thrilled, and he runs off, and everybody else go, yeah. Fantastic article written in 2008, where they interviewed a number of senior executives asking one question. In 35 words or less, can you say what your company's strategy is? And what do you think most did? Too many words, wrong answers, and my favorite, I have to look it up first. In 2009, this fantastic book came out, and a lot of movements started happening, especially in Europe, around designing visual business models. Now, I know many of you have worked with the business model canvas, and it's a fantastic tool, and it's really started a movement, and Holger has worked extensively with this movement in designing more visual strategies and more visual business. 2010, fantastic book by David Sibbett on visual meetings. 2011, Dan Rome writes probably his best book so far. It says blah, 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 where most management teams, they kill energy, kill strategy, kill ideation, because they talk it to death. 2012, David Sibbett releases his new book, Visual Leaders. And today we have visual facilitators like Holger over here, who's traveling the world, trying to initiate, if you will, a global revolution in designing visual strategy and innovation thinking. And this is from one of his workshops in Oslo, working on the board or on the iPad, designing visual business models, designing visual strategy. It creates more creativity, and it creates more buy-in, and it creates more understanding. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the big picture, the very big high-level picture of strategy today.